Today we're going to look at a field that's capable of producing 1.5 million barrels. That's way in excess of what the entire UK continental shelf can produce. At the end of this video, we're going to explain the significance of that. Hang around. Now here is a location map, and we're looking at the field Majnoon. It's Arabic for crazy. Crazy amounts of oil have been found, and here it is located way down in the south of Iraq, near the city of Basra. Well, we pretty much chose a field at random. We could have chosen Ramallah, Zubair, West Kurna, but instead we chose Majnoon. It's one of 4 fields awarded to foreign companies via licensing rounds. We've not had any correspondence with the state-owned operator Basra Oil Company. Majnoon is highlighted with the big arrow, and it was actually during the second licensing round. It took place in 2009. The award made in January 2010. Now, if we look at reserves, in Majnoon, around about 12 billion barrels of oil equivalent. Now, a number quoted for 2022 said there was an oil in place reported at 47 billion barrels of oil. The 31% recovery factor there would get you to about a STOIP of 39 billion barrels. So obviously a revision and a different estimate for how much oil in place there is. So if we look at the companies involved in here, well, it was discovered back by, Braspetro, which kind of better known as Petrobras today, the Brazilian company, discovered back in 1975. Since the licensing round, Shell went in as operator with 45% equity, Petronas Carigali and Missan Oil 25%. Shell came out of the field. They sold their interests back in 2017, 2018. It's now part of the Basra Oil Company, which is the state-owned operator. Now, if we look at the reservoirs here, the large stratigraphic column, this is from the Kurdistan region in the north, and on the left, the not quite as impressive strat column there, showing the more local Basra area lithostratigraphy. The Hartha Formation, that's the first pay zone, quite close to the surface, flowed at 4,000 barrels of oil, very gassy crude. And it was abnormally high pressure to the extent there was a blowout and the rig was destroyed. The major reservoir is the Mishrif. It's the middle Cretaceous carbonates. And then you can see as you go down the list there are deeper reservoirs within the Cretaceous. The development of this field has been interrupted by the Gulf War and before that the Iran-Iraq War. And so the deepening has been postponed. A lot of fields in the region, particularly in Saudi Arabia, Iran, the United Arab Emirates, they have indeed found gas down in the Kuf Formation down in the Permian. Now, looking in a little bit more detail, here are the reservoirs, the lithologies, the seals, and the seal strata type. There are some drilling hazards up there in the Eocene and the Dammam, which is a fractured carbonate reservoir, and source rocks shown right at the bottom there. They're in the Calovian to Bajocian, Middle Jurassic source rocks. Pause the video if you want to see details here, but there's a breakdown of the Mishrif, the major reservoir. On the right-hand side, you can see it accounts for 25.95 billion barrels of the 35.4 billion barrel total that's shown in this analysis here. The reservoir properties within the Mishrif, very variable. We get a lot of detail for the geology of the Majnoon oil field. Having a look at the structure, it's a fallen basin here with the Zagros Mountains, the fold belt or thrust belt on the right-hand side in the east, and Majnoon, kind of similar location to, where you might find Gawa or some of the big fields on the Saudi Arabia side, and we've done videos on those. In terms of the source rock maturity and timing, well, these Middle Jurassic source rocks, they've been modelled in the deeper parts of the nearby source kitchens to the Majnoon field. There was this thickening, this deepening in around about the Miocene times, which has probably been the major pulse of hydrocarbon expulsion. The very earliest maturity goes back into the late Cretaceous. So here's the oil production profile, and this comes from global data. You can see that back in the 2000s, it was doing in the order of 40 to 50,000 barrels a day. That's going to ramped up in the sort of 2010s up to about 200,000 barrels a day. Here we are, the red dashed line shows today, 2024, and anticipated that it's going to ramp all the way up to 450,000 barrels a day. But we read that the unconstrained potential for this field is of the order of 1.5 million barrels a day. In fact, we've also seen a number as high as 3 million barrels of oil per day. Could be on plateau for the best part of 30 years and then a long decline period. This is a huge field and it's got lots and lots of potential. Now here's a quick look at the facilities. This of course coming from Google Earth. There's a satellite image of some of the facilities, and kind of dotted on here where we believe the outline of the field is. This is a block boundary on the right hand side. That is Iran over to the east and Iraq on the west. I've spoken about Majnoon having the potential to get to 1.5 million barrels, but why hasn't it achieved peak production? Well, quite a checkered history. Lots of unexploded ordnance in the Iran-Iraq war from the 80s to 88. And then the region was flooded to make it difficult for the Iran to invade the region. Iraq today has difficulty marketing its crude due to some sanctions. There's been a change of operators. Shell sold out their share and Basra Oil Company have taken over. There are OPEC quota restrictions that kind of kicked in from 2020. So all of these things have meant that the Majnoon Phase 2 was put on hold in 2021, and that was going to be of the order of about $5 billion. Also, there was going to be a sour gas treatment plant, and as far as I understand, that was also put on hold. Here's the global oil production, and this comes from the Energy Institute's statistical review for 2024. You can see highlighted Iraq here, so it has a significant oil production as shown. And if we look in more detail at the gas, well, we can see it's this dark orange band here. So it's not quite as prolific as it once was, but it's certainly still a significant contributor. Now, if we compare that to the UK oil production, and this is really kind of the point of making this video, that here is the entirety of the UK, everything in the North Sea, West of Shetlands, Irish Sea. You can see that right now we're in a period of decline, and in 2023 there's around about 0.7 million barrels of oil per day. That is the total UK oil production. We've just shown you a field that potentially could be doing 1.5 million. It's doing about 500,000 barrels right now, planned to be increasing significantly, and could be on plateau all the way to 2050 and beyond. Now, in the UK and in Western Europe in general, these are some of the bodies that the oil and gas industry has to contend with. Greenpeace, Just Stop Oil, Extinction Rebellion. We all know these people. They try and grab the headlines whenever they can, glue themselves to roads, etc. But we have also a change of fiscal policy on a very frequent basis. Most recently, the windfall tax on crude oil. But of course, the changes of government also, they look to bring about new taxation and just disrupt everything. Very, very difficult for companies to plan with all these disruptions and challenges going on. We're probably one of the least stable fiscal regimes on the planet, and I blame these interfering, myopic, vote-grabbing politicians. So the oil and gas industry, it is regulated and indeed self-regulated. And we've got regulators like the North Sea Transition Authority with a fields consent system looking at flare applications, for example. We've got the Offshore Petroleum Regulator for environmental and decommissioning, that's OPRED for short. And we've got the stewardship, we've got planning permissions, more so on the onshore side of things. We've got safety constraints, HSE constraints, and of course, companies have their own HSE standards and environmental, social and governance issues and policies that they adhere to. So that's just to name but a few. Now, do similar regulations apply to overseas jurisdictions? There's a question. No. And you can see, here's a series of images that I've taken from various parts of the world. You can see that perhaps the regulations may not be quite as stringent. If you want to see more details, I would recommend this BBC iPlayer documentary. It's pretty hard-hitting. So we've looked at Majnoon today, and it really is a random example of a field that many of our viewers, well, will not have heard of, and nor had we really spent much time until we looked into it. We could look into it because it's all in our TROVE database. We've got so many details on just about every field on the planet. It's just one of the hundreds of fields in the Middle East we could have chosen. Majnoon in itself is capable of producing way more oil than the entirety of the UK North Sea. We're not aware of the regulations, the detailed operational practices, nor the ESG credentials of the current operator for Majnoon. It's not really relevant. They may be first class, but when the UK government has run the oil and gas industry, the indigenous industry, into the ground, just to prove how green we can be and to see our emissions actually falling, we will be importing oil and gas from overseas fields to satisfy UK domestic demand. which may have very different environmental standards to those that the UK has in place. Add to that, we will have the additional emissions associated with transporting energy to UK consumers. It is madness. Let's develop indigenous oil and gas reserves within the UK North Sea before taking them from overseas and just moving the problem away from these shores and losing all control on environmental emissions and a whole lot more. Thanks for listening. I just want to clarify, we are not implying Majnoon's operator is doing anything wrong or untoward. For all we know, they may be best in all operation classes. That's irrelevant and missing the point. However, we could quote numbers for operators of fields in this region and in this area where flaring in particular is rife. As we always say, there is only one atmosphere. If it's pollution and it's happening in the Middle East or wherever in the world, then it's all affecting global carbon emissions. So we should invest our money and energies in cleaning our worst polluters. And currently, that's coal.